What's up, everybody? UFC 317 is right around the corner. We are just a couple of days away from the big international fight week fight card taking place in Las Vegas, Nevada. Ilia Topuria up to the lightweight division, who takes on Charles do Bronx Oliveira for the vacant lightweight strap. Alexandra Pantoja takes on Kai Kara France in a flyweight showdown. And it's a good card overall. Brandon Royval, Joshua Van, Benil Dariush, Renato Moicano, Peyton Talbot, Felipe Lima takes up your main card on Saturday night. Shawnee, International Fight Week in a year that has been pretty underwhelming so far for the UFC, in a year where, we were expecting some magic with the new TV rights broadcast deal. Is this International Fight Week going to be the card that saves the UFC in 2025?
I don't think so. No, just because there isn't anything really blockbuster on it. I really like the main event. I think Ilia Topuria is one of the best fighters in the world, and Charles Oliveira, an amazing fighter as well, and Pantoja, the most dominant champion we have at the moment. It was funny. If I hadn't looked at my emails just before we started, I would have been shocked by you saying it was International Fight Week there, because I got an email from the UFC saying, International Fight Week, Rota or whatever it was. I'm like, hold on, this is International Fight Week. I haven't seen one piece of content. I don't know. And this is, people are saying, I was talking about the old days and all. But remember International Fight Week before, you'd have 10 people out there covering it. You'd have loads of one-on-one interviews. You would have seen people talking to Topuria, people talking to Charles Oliveira, maybe a Peyton Talbot interview or a Benil there. I don't, maybe there is now, and I'm just not, and I'm definitely not following it as closely as I once did, but it feels, I'm really excited about the fights, and the fight's really good, but a lot of that is coming from kind of me watching a bit of tape and us just...
Yeah, but it's just the same as every kind of other pay-per-view card. I feel like definitely getting those vibes where it's not really standing out as, what UFC would formerly used to present International Fight Week as, Shawnee. And, I remember International Fight Weeks where we used to have fight nights, was it twice or three nights in a row, wasn't it? They did the Frankie Edgar fight on the Friday night. They did the main pay-per-view card then on the Saturday night
card. Remember on the one card on Thursday night, Invicta on a Friday night, in the main card on Saturday or something like that. Yeah.
But I just look at it fits the bill and what the UFC and what they're trying to present to us, the fans, and to us, the media, to us, the content creators, whatever you want to call us, as that,
journalists.
Sure. I feel weird labeling myself that, but whatever you want to call it. But I think we should get that out of the way. I think we can judge this based on the magnitude of the event of the week, which is normally a big ticket item. We do have a big ticket item in the main event between Ilia Topuria and Charles Oliveira. They are fighting for the Islam Makhachev's now vacant lightweight title as he moves up to the welterweight division. And, a pretty exciting fight, Sean, that tops the bill here as well. Sign me up anytime Ilia Topuria steps inside the octagon. The same for Charles Oliveira as well. Really, on paper, this fight is one that will absolutely deliver one way or another. For how long it delivers for, I guess we can get into in a little bit, but very, very intriguing. I think the right move for Ilia Topuria, who, didn't spend a prolonged period of time at flyweight or featherweight division, but did pretty much clear out the division too. There was maybe a couple of challengers there, but not one that would be matching the excitement levels of a fight like this with Charles Oliveira.
Indeed, just one thing is before we get into that. This is, as you mentioned, for the vacant title, and I saw two very funny tweets this week. It was someone connected with Charles Oliveira. It might have been Ian Gary or someone Ian Gary was tagged in, but they put hashtag and new in it, which I thought was hilarious. Because no matter who wins, it's going to be and Chris Fields did the exact same thing for the Cage Warriors interim title fight that's coming up tomorrow night as well. Is he one of his fighters in it? Is that right?
Omar Tugarev is in that fight. Yeah,
So I knew it could be either of them. So I just thought that was a little bit funny. But yeah, this fight, the further I'm getting into thinking about this fight, and the longer. The shorter we have left between now and Saturday, the more intrigue I think, I find in it, because you asked me a couple of weeks ago, and look, I'll still say the same now. I expected Ilia Topuria to win, and win pretty comprehensively. But I don't know if you saw, Ian, that picture of Ilia Topuria with Kai Kara France, where, Kai Kara France is a 125 pounder, and, he's a relatively big 125 pounder, but he's not exactly 6'2". And Topuria was, wasn't that much bigger than him. And now, we know about Charles Oliveira. He used to be a featherweight, as you mentioned, but he had big issues getting to featherweight. And like, he's a genuine tall lightweight now. It's hard to think that that's not going to be some sort of an issue for Ilia Topuria, especially with the way Charles Oliveira fights. And I think, like, this fight, as funny as it sounds, and I actually kind of like this, it's all about the fight for me. Like, we've had all the stuff with Makasha, we've had all the stuff with Topuria moving up, obviously Makasha moving up as well. The vacant belt here, and, Jack de la Madalena, kind of the odd champion at welterweight who no one expects maybe to stay too long. No disrespect to Jack or anything like that, but it feels now that we have Topuria versus Oliveira, this is all about the X's and O's, and all about who will be the man with his hand raised on Saturday night. And like, I think it will be Topuria for like one simple reason. I think he's one of the best technicians the sport has ever seen. We had the debate the other day about the GOAT, and I was arguing for Demetrius Johnson, and it's very rare we see guys who you would think of in that ilk. But, I've said it about Volkanovski before, but looking at Topuria right now, look, he's obviously a lot still to prove, don't get me wrong, but he's in that ilk of like this special technical fighter. Like, he has the physical ability and the athletic ability as well. There's no doubt about that, but his technique is unbelievable from someone who looks at it as a layperson, let's say, who's just watched a lot of fights and knows what something silky looks like without being able to actually reproduce it or tell someone else how to reproduce it. And he just looks as silky as anyone to ever do this sport. But what Oliveira brings in is that raw aggression and belief and proven ability to do it, right? Like, he's won fights down through the years, he's lost fights down through the years. What he has proven is he can go in there against guys and throw it all out and come out on the winning side. He really, really, really can. Guys that he probably shouldn't have been beaten, guys that he probably shouldn't have been, are getting to places after the early part of his career, the mid part of his career, where he probably shouldn't have been getting to. And you can't rule a guy like that out. You really can't, especially plus 500 or whatever he is. But that's the intrigue in this. Can the smaller guy overcome the bigger guy with the best technique, or can the bigger guy who has found a way, like, this is technique versus tactics, really. Can the tactics work? I suppose we'll see.
And Charles I think he enjoys the mantra being a kind of an underdog coming in here as well. And it was the picture for me. Like, for me, how I was describing this fight a couple of weeks out, Shawnee, was a great fight, one that I'm looking forward to, but a very predictable fight. Because, through analysis and looking at that, there's just, and still to a certain degree, I think there's levels of doubt that have creeped into my opinion on how this fight is going to go over the last number of days. And the picture that you mentioned is one. The size difference, maybe the magnitude of the event. But, you mentioned Ilia Topuria's technique and how savvy he is on the feet, but that's also mixed with vicious power, Shawnee. Vicious power that we've seen against the likes of Alexander Volkanovski and Max Holloway in his last fight. And I think, the question is, does the power carry into the lightweight division? And I don't see any way or reason to think that it's not going to carry in to the lightweight division, especially against a guy like Charles Oliveira, who has a style that he just does not know how to move backwards. He's a forward-moving pressure fighter, and I don't know whether that's going to be the best tactic coming in here to take on a big hitter like Ilia Topuria, which kind of raises and complements your opinion on this fight, where it's technique versus tactics, where what got Charles Oliveira to the dance and what has seen him become champion is something that he might need to throw away in this fight. And I think that adds the extra intrigue to me to see if he's going to do that. If you were to have a gun to my head and ask if he is going to do it, I think no. I think those core tendencies are always going to shine through for Charles, but I think he's got to be smart here. This is probably the final chance that he's ever going to have to lift the the lightweight championship in the UFC. I think if he loses this, he's probably going to be fighting contenders, and it's going to be very hard for him to get back. He definitely deserves this position right here, and it's going to be up to him. I think this fight is going to be won on last based off what Charles do Bronx Oliveira does inside the octagon on Saturday night.
Do you know what's funny? Looking at the two losses he's had in this run of 15 fights or whatever it is, there is Makhachev and Arman Tsarukyan, and like both of those guys took him down at different times in those fights. You'd wonder if Topuria will take him down. You wonder if he has the backing in his own ability on the ground to take him down. We know how amazing of a striker he is. Like, we've seen him on the ground. He's really, really good on the ground as well. But there's been really good on the ground, and then there's fighting on the ground with Charles Oliveira. It's a different kettle of fish altogether. So I'll be interested to see if Topuria can beat him in a way that's different to the other people. Now, especially Makhachev had success on the feet as well. There's no doubt about that. And Tsarukyan maybe less so. It was a split decision. It was a closer fight. But I would just be interested to see what way Topuria actually kind of goes about it, because you were kind of mentioned there as well the aggression of Oliveira. Like, at 35 years of age, when you said this is his last chance, like, will that aggression go overboard? Like, it's very tough to keep the right level of aggression. Like, will it go overboard, or will he pull back on it a bit, considering the guy he is fighting with, as you mentioned as well, the power of Topuria? It's very, very tough. Like, I think the thing that made Charles Oliveira special over the last 15 fights or whatever it was that ability just to let everything go. He fought like a guy who didn't care about tomorrow. And sometimes, some guys need to fight that way. But that's going to be really tough to do in a fight like this. And I'm intrigued. One thing we always have to mention is the 5 rounds as well. And look, both of these guys have fought 5 rounds, plenty of times. Charles, not as much. Maybe he fought his last fight to 5 rounds. But before that, I'm just looking through here. Actually, there was never another 5-round fight. So to say plenty of times is untrue. Topuria has only gone there once as well, although he's been due to go there a few times. But I'd be interested to see how they fight the 5-round pace. Like, Topuria with an extra 10 pounds in his back compared to other fights. Like, the general talk has been that Topuria was struggling to get down to 145, and that's why he went up to 155. But now, you're seeing the pictures of him and he's looking that small. Like, how true is that? Or, as you suggested, is he just doing that because he kind of cleaned out the division? Or in his opinion, he cleaned out the division anyway. That all plays into it. It's all to me all intriguing. Like, Topuria's, we talk about Oliveira's style being very like heavy-handed. Heavy-handed's wrong, but like, I suppose heavy in terms of cardio. If he was to do that for 3, 4, 5 rounds, it'll take a lot of it out of him. But so is Topuria's, really. Like, if you're throwing that many power shots, if you are trying to take Oliveira down, those takedowns add up as well in terms of your gas tank. I'd be interested to see how he works. So we have seen lads move up in weight classes, and it's taken them a few fights to adjust to that extra weight. We'll see how Topuria can deal with that. But look, overall, I think my thoughts in this are probably not too dissimilar to yours. I think if Topuria can get that jab going, if he can work kind of all the way out or all the way in, if he's too fast for Oliveira, but to catch him in both ways with the strikes or with the hands / grappling, I think he'll just be too much for Oliveira. But again, the last point I'll make, Oliveira can be very dangerous early. He's a lot of early finishes, and Topuria has been caught early. Look at the Jai Herbert fight and other fights as well. He has been a little bit off earlier in his fights. Now, some fights obviously not, but that's one thing I would look at as well. But overall, my pick is definitely Topuria, and I just think I have to go with the more technical guy, and a guy this good, I have to go with him.
Yeah, for sure. I think so too. Just to circle back around and maybe mention a couple of different points than what you mentioned, I also want to highlight, the excellent footwork and distance control. I think the ability that Ilia Topuria has developed and what he's shown in the Alex Volkanovski fight and the Max Holloway fight is the ability to set traps and to have his opponents, even on the back foot, walk into his shots or walk into areas where he knows he's going to land his shots. You're looking at getting to past that threshold, getting them close up against the cage, using that footwork to kind of corner. I think what he will do is I think Charles Oliveira is going to fight probably that aggressive nature until he tastes some of the power from Ilia Topuria, which would make him feel hesitant. And it's that moment where he starts to feel hesitant is when Ilia Topuria is going to start smelling blood. And then he's going to get closer, he's going to land. And if he hurts Charles Oliveira, I don't think we've seen a killer instinct like it for a little bit. When Ilia Topuria has you hurt, has you on the back foot, he is going to get you out of there. I'm very, very excited to see that one. It's going to be exciting for however long it lasts. And it's a fight. Look, we talk about this and that on an International Fight Week. This is definitely a fight that's worthy of topping the bill on International Fight Week for sure. Alejandro Pantoja goes in there against Kai Kara France. It's a rematch, Shawnee, from when the two battled on the Ultimate Fighter season, when all the flyweight champions went into the house. We had a fight between these two, a fight which Alexander Pantoja won by decision. It was only 2 rounds. It was only labeled an exhibition fight, but both of these guys have grown since then. I want to give Alejandro Pantoja a shout out for his level of activity as a champion, because we don't have champions like this too often in modern mixed martial arts. And Alejandro Pantoja is getting out there and is fighting these guys and these top contenders and doing a fantastic job as well. And fair play to him. I think he's a great guy that kind of flew a little bit under the radar as a champion. But some of those recent performances, Shawnee, big wins over Brandon Royval, Steve Erceg, and Kai Asakura in his last fight. I think the much needed finish in his last fight would have added an extra little bit of excitement and intrigue onto this fight with Kai Kara France, who will pose a few difficult challenges in his own right.
Yeah, it's a very interesting fight. And just on Pantoja first, I think you're right. Like he was, and maybe this is a bit unfair, but maybe he was known as a guy who would be very talented in fights, have very close fights, and then maybe fade away, lose the 3rd round, and lose some fights. Like, we have to go back and watch it, but like I seem to remember Askar Askarov kind of outworking him, Davidson Figueiredo as well. And he's actually turned that around to be a guy who does that to his opponents. He's the guy who looks very tired, as the boys in the co-main event podcast call it. It's the Mark Coleman, isn't it? Yeah, where you are, and the Showman who as well, where you look really, really tired, but you actually just keep fighting normally. And that is exactly what Pantoja is. He's really, really good at doing that. And, even the Steve Erceg fight, Erceg had a very good start to that and could have won that fight, but he turned it around and not necessarily turned it around, but he got through it and he won it. Same with the Royval and Moreno fights, going 5 rounds 3 times in a row in the space of, 10 months or something like that, to your point. Very, very active. Now, he has had, around 7 months off before this fight, so there is a bit of a break, and that's a good thing. But, like, I was kind of thinking, that it's very often that people who do fight an awful lot do end up, getting caught, and like not just getting caught like a punch, somebody like losing, because it can get too much. You'd wonder if that few months off was enough. I'm not sure. Maybe there was an injury or whatever there might have been.
He had a pretty easy run of it against Kai Asakura, really, in reality as well. Like, didn't take that much damage and was dominant too. So, I'd be a little bit more worried if he did take up a lot more damage heading into this fight with the 7 months off. But, it's probably just, sorry to interrupt you, just kind of a thought that sprung into my head there.
I think you're right, yeah. So maybe it is a good thing. Like, I find this fight kind of hard to pick, because I think Pantoja is more likely to lose to a guy like Kai Kara France than he is to lose to a guy who maybe will stack up against him, technique for technique, because of what I just mentioned there, his ability to kind of outlast them, and he's really good durability over a long time and all like that. I don't know. I often think with fighters like him, that we've seen down through the years, it's someone that's going to catch him with something big. And we've seen, there's no doubt he's able to do that. Look at Steve Erceg last time out, and he's like, Kai's weird as well. Like, he lost 2 fights before that, and in the fight before that, he beat Askar Askarov, who we just mentioned, beat his opponent on the weekend. He's some really good wins, and like, he's lost to a lot of the top guys as well. Lost to Brandon Moreno a couple of times, lost to Brandon Royval as well in there, so at 32 years of age as well, this is probably, for the smaller guys, this might be his last opportunity too. But I don't know, I just have a feeling that coming into this fight, a little bit like Limerick against Dublin last weekend, maybe maybe he might be underestimating a little bit. Maybe he looks at Kai Kara-France and go, look, if I avoid that right hand, what else really? Is there really much else there? And that's it. And I'm not saying he's going in with that, but what if he is? That's not a good attitude to go in with against the guy who's fighting. This is the biggest moment of Kai Kara-France's career. This is not the biggest moment of Alexandre Pantoja's career. This is another title defense for him, and it's great and it's massive and it's everything like that. But if it just dips a little bit, a guy like Kai Kara-France can make you pay. And, look, in all likelihood, Kai Kara-France will throw his big shots in the first 2 rounds, and Pantoja will outlast him and maybe win the decision.
That's
but
going to be the winning. It's going to be the winning and losing of this fight too. If you were to ask me how to describe a brief analysis on this fight, I would have said the exact same thing, Shawnee. I would have said the first 10 minutes of this fight are going to be super important, because that's when Kai Kara-France is going to be at his most dangerous. He's going to be at his most difficult to take down. But if Pantoja can get past that first 10 minutes, some of the pop and the punches, starts going away, not as sprightly on his takedown defense. And I think the key for Pantoja is some of the excellent analysis that you've said in the past, is just not giving up on that takedown. If it doesn't work, just make him work, stay safe, and I guarantee you he'll break him down. And I think if Kai Kara-France can win the first 2 rounds, and he could make it interesting throughout this fight. But I think if we're in a world where Pantoja does have the ability to take him down, and I think that's definitely going to be the game plan for him here. I'd be absolutely shocked if he went with another game plan. I think he's going to try and set a ferocious pace. He's going to be chaining takedown attempts time after time. He's going to be trying to drain the gas tank of Kai Kara-France. I think he will do that. I think I predicted for Pantoja to kind of wear him down and get a submission maybe in round 4. That was my official prediction. But, round 4, round 5 could be fairly straightforward for Pantoja. But I don't want to completely pour cold water over the chances of Kai Kara-France. I think what makes this fight interesting, what does add a level of intrigue, is that one-punch knockout power that Kai Kara-France has. And I'm very interested to see if he can land that punch on the button, if he can do some damage. And if he does, it could very well be looking at a new champion on Saturday.
Yeah, and I think as well, my favorite topic this week, there'll be a lot of clinching from Pantoja here early. I will say, though, Kai Kara-France, like a lot of guys who are punchers, when they come back up from a takedown, when they break off a clinch, they just, you're thinking, oh, here, now's the time they're going to go and get the knockout. Most modern people are not. We just don't see that anymore. A guy gets up and he knocks someone out. Kai Kara-France is kind of the exception to that rule, I think. I think he is actually really good at doing that. Maybe it's a little bit easier because it's a smaller guy, and the gas tank is maybe a little bit easier to have as well. But I think that, again, you said, dangerous for the first 10 minutes. I agree with that. And I think Kai Kara-France will actually be very dangerous in those positions. Let's say if Pantoja puts him against the cage and let's say it's 90 seconds or something like that, and there's of cage control, and then they break off for a couple of minutes to go, Kai Kara-France will be more dangerous in that position than like most people pound for pound in the world will be in the first round, in the second round. So I'd be intrigued by that. I don't know. I really like Pantoja. I just have a feeling, I'll be wrong more than likely, but I just have a feeling Kai Kara-France is going to do it. I don't know why. So
yeah, well, no, I don't think there's anything wrong with feeling that, Shawnee. I think what Pantoja has is that he's coming off of a camp where he was going in, taking on a heavy hitter, a kind of a boxer. He's going to have to deal with a couple of more, differences, obviously, with Kai Kara-France and his more kind of Muay Thai heavy style. You're going to have to watch out for the elbows and the knees in the clinch. But, there's definitely not beyond the realms of possibility of why Kai Kara-France will get it done. But, I'm not that convinced. I think, styles make fights, and I think Pantoja just has an absolutely horrible style for a guy like Kai Kara-France. We're talking about a guy who's tasted defeat 11 times, Shawnee, so through losses and by knockout, through submission, and by decision. So there's a couple of different avenues here that Pantoja could go down. I don't think the striking is going to be the smartest one. I'd be interested to see, when you get to that champ status and the confidence is up, you might fancy your chances of standing and striking with somebody, and that's where it could all be ended in a moment if you're Alejandro Pantoja. But, an interesting co-main event too. Always enjoy the flyweights. #fly never die. Flyweights will keep us entertained right ahead of the co-main and the main event. And that's Brandon Royval versus Joshua Van, who seems to be fighting every second weekend here inside the cage. Love Joshua Van as a fighter. Love his rise up through the rankings there. Ever since his debut in the UFC, at a young kid when he made his debut at 21 years of age in the UFC, now only 23 years of age, has tons of years to grow. A guy who I could, I don't like to throw it out here but a guy I could definitely see becoming a champion in the flyweight division. But the big question is it a bit too much too soon? Is he biting off a little bit more than he can chew? Because the UFC don't give a shit about him. They're going to throw him in a fight like this because, it makes it an exciting fight. But they don't care about his career progression. And, a loss for him at this stage of his career is not detrimental. I think a loss could learn. He could learn a lot from a loss against a guy like Brandon Royval. But what he has here is a guy across from him that, has a chip on his shoulder and always seems to have a chip on his shoulder in Brandon Royval, who's kind of being overlooked in this fight due to the activity levels of Joshua Van. We're very, what have you done for me lately kind of mindset in MMA, where you can kind of forget the level of talent that a guy like Brandon Royval can bring in here. And, when they talk about styles making fights, he's probably going to be looking to come in here and put Joshua Van on his back and frustrating him here as well. And I think, it's going to be a tough one. It's not beyond the realms of possibility, like I said, with Kai Kara France, that Joshua Van can get a win here. He's shown moments of class inside of there, but what he's going in against is elite level competition with championship experience and a guy who's gone and beaten some very good guys. It's a big test here for Joshua Van coming in.
Yeah, it is. But you talked about activity there, and it's absolutely crazy. 16 fights into his career. He only made his debut in 2021. Like, that's absolutely insane, Sean. Crazy. Like, in the space of, so November 23, he fought 4 times in 24, and then he fought in March of 25 as well. Like, that's, what is that, 6 fights in the space of 15 months or whatever. It's absolutely crazy. And do you know what? We've talked about this before, obviously, with Irish guys and stuff coming up. I think for a guy who's 23 years of age, that is the best thing you could do. Like, he lost one fight in there as well. He got knocked out, and he maybe he came back a little bit too soon, but he came back and he won, and he continued to win. Like, it's interesting. He went into the UFC and he fought Salah Samagulov, who's fighting for the title in Octagon this week, funnily enough, and he beat him. Like, you could argue that's his best win to date. Now, the Bruno Silva win was a very, very good win as well. But to your point about this being maybe a bit of a move too quick, too soon, if we're judging by what he's already fought, it absolutely is. Now, he could be the best fighter in the world. He could go in there and beat Brandon Royval. And do you know what? I think he's the betting favorite. He was when I did the betting show anyway, yesterday or the day before. I don't know. I just have a lot of respect for Brandon Royval and what he's done over the last few fights. Like, him against Brandon Moreno, that performance, the Tatsutiara performance, is absolutely fantastic. And I know both of those were split decisions, and they're both good fighters. But I just think Brandon Royval is a really, really, really top level fighter. And I don't think Joshua Van is far off it either. But it'd be very tough for him to beat a guy at this stage of his career. Against a guy like Royval, who's probably in the prime of his career. And if you got another title shot, you would be very, very. It'd be very hard to pick against him, I know, okay, he's lost to Pantoja twice, but let's say Pantoja loses this weekend, Royval will probably be the guy, having beaten Kai Kara France already, who will be in there and might be the favorite for it if he was to win as well. So, it's a very intriguing fight, but it's a fight. Royval needs another fight. I think we all kind of acknowledge that. But if he was to lose and Van was to beat him, wouldn't it just be amazing for this division? Like, to have someone like that who's now the clear number one contender. Like, Joshua Van wins this fight, he is fighting for the title next. I don't think there's any shred or doubt about that. It would be absolutely massive. So I think it's kind of bad matchmaking and good matchmaking at the same time. I think I do fancy Royval to win, but it's a win-win situation for the UFC really, and I'm looking forward to seeing it. And good that this fight is on the same card as the flyweight title fight as well. I think that's smart.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more on that. And just to kind of finalize the analysis on this, obviously Joshua Van was excellent in his win recently against Bruno Silva, but you watch back that fight and there was moments there where you're thinking, where he makes some decisions. I think number one, he could have got the fight finished a little bit quicker than what he did if he had made a couple of different adjustments there. I think he got caught in a couple of scrambled positions. That makes me worried going in against a guy like Brandon Royval, who's an absolutely scramble monster inside the octagon. It's very hard to out-scramble that man. And, Joshua Van, the level of greenness that he can show so early in his career, that might come back to haunt him in this one. But like I said, kind of without, rooting for either side, it'd be a fantastic story to see Joshua Van do this and see him rip roar through up the division. And, you get into that title shot and you never know.
Just one last point in the flyweights before we move on.
Yeah.
You said Kai Garbrandt has lost 11 fights in his career.
Yeah.
Sure, so is Anderson Silva, the greatest of all time.
The greatest of all time. Graham knows nothing. Nothing then. Well, he throws a few. Hey, he throws a bit of spinning shit, and he thinks he's the greatest of all time.
Sure, yeah. Jeez, right. Wind that fella.
Renato Moicano steps in to take on Beneil Dariush in the 155-pound division. Your boy Beneil coming in here for a tough fight. I think. I'd been and seen Beneil Dariush in that fight against Charles Oliveira, and the figure that he caught behind the scenes in those kind of media day interviews and everything like that was a guy that, with all due respect to him, that's not truly there anymore, Shawnee. I think he's lost a little bit of that fire, lost a bit of that fight, that kind of drive, I think. But it's easy to say that when he's going out there and fighting Charles Oliveira and Arman Tsarukyan. Those fights did not go well for him. 2 first-round stoppages, and he comes in here against Renato Moicano, who's on a good run, on a kind of a good trajectory. Obviously fought Islam Makhachev in his last fight on short notice, and no chance in that fight. It's going to be an interesting match here. I think if this was 2 years ago, I'm Beneil Dariush all day long. Not so sure coming into this Saturday night. And I think, for me, Renato Moicano is the favorite coming in here. What do you think?
I like Beneil, as people know. I've always been a big fan of him. If he was fighting another one of the top lightweights, most of them, I'd probably be picking against Beneil here, because I do agree with you. I don't know what he once was, but I still think he has enough in him to beat guys that are kind of good matchups for him. Like, I remember the Charles Oliveira fight. That was the worst possible matchup for Beneil Dariush. It was a guy who was as good or better than him on the ground, and a guy who could hit really hard. Like, that is the nightmare for Beneil Dariush. I'll put this to you, Ian. Renato Moicano, 2 knockouts in 27 fights. This is not a guy who's knocking people out left, right, and center. He's also been submitted twice in his career. Last fight, in fact, he got submitted against Islam Makhachev as well. I just think this is a kind of a good matchup for Beneil Dariush. Now, Q Moicano beating the living shit out of him for 3 rounds. But I don't know. I just think he hits harder than Moicano. He's a better jiu-jitsu player than Moicano. Now, the wrestling of Moicano has been really good in this run, and it's funny, he has this whole Money Moicano thing going on, while he's turned into a much more boring fighter, but it's been winning for him, so there's no criticism for me.
The money is in the win, Shawnee, not in the fucking not in the how you win.
Do you think, I'll throw this over to you, do you think it's dangerous to go in there and play a wrestling game against a guy like Beneil Dariush with the jiu-jitsu ability he has? Now, he hasn't submitted someone in a very, very long time, but that's usually because people kind of avoid it with him, but he's very good on the ground.
He's very good on the ground, but it's like, is this going to be a straight wrestling fight? I don't think it is. It's like, he needs to wrestle, then he needs to break and stick an elbow into Beneil Dariush's face. So what Renato Moicano needs to do is really ask the questions that we're asking here now, Shawnee, is that, does Beneil really want to do this anymore? Because you can go and you can do your training camp and you can do your interviews and you can say this and you can say that and you can say the other, but you get to a certain stage of your career, and all fighters feel like this, where you just really don't want to get fucking hit in the face anymore. And, that's the kind of vibes I'm getting from Beneil Dariush. And I think this is a big fight, maybe to prove me wrong or to prove the other doubters wrong, that, he doesn't want to be here anymore, because the result of this fight is going to tell us, Sean. It's going to tell us whether Beneil Dariush really wants to do this, or is his time up? Has he got past that threshold of, that fire in his belly, that motivation to get over the finish line? Because, when push comes to shove in there, you've got to answer those questions. And that, in this fight, that's what I'm curious to see on Saturday night. It should be interesting to find out. Could turn into a bit of a boring fest. I don't think it's going to be that wise for Moicano to kind of stand and bang with a guy like Beneil Dariush, who carries savage power as well in his hands. So I think this is going to be a fight where Moicano is going to have to probably frustrate Beneil Dariush, frustrate us watching and frustrates the fans live in attendance by winning a kind of a grueling in and out wrestling clinching battle by landing those dirty shots in it. You're going to be loving this one. We're going to be getting another rant this Sunday if this fight plays out how I think it's going to play out.
What was that face about? That rant was amazing. That was a great rant.
Oh no, I didn't mean to throw a face. I didn't mean to throw a face. It was an amazing rant, and I agree with it. I do agree with it too. I think the clinch is definitely an area that needs to be looked at, but we could be getting to an old clinch central there in this fight on Saturday night. Opening up the card, the bantamweight division, two top prospects coming in. Strange matchmaking here, Sean, it has to be said. Throwing two highly touted prospects in there together. Obviously one of them is going to have to lose. Peyton Talbot, highly touted as one of the next big things last year before that defeat to Ronnie Barcelos. A little bit too much too soon. He ain't getting no break here from the UFC matchmakers coming in against a guy like Felipe Lima, who's been massively impressive in his UFC run so far. Coming in, beating Muhammad Naimov, beating Miles Johns. This is a jump up in class for Peyton Talbot, but, we saw a bit of a chink in the armor with Talbot here, and I think Felipe Lima has the kind of style and I think the grit to go in there and make things difficult for a guy like Peyton Talbot, who is this flashy kind of land a strike, admire your work kind of fighter. And he found out the hard way against a guy like Ronnie Barcelos that is not going to work all the time. So what changes has he made? What changes is he going to bring in on Saturday night? And will they work against an extremely high prospect in Felipe Lima?
Yeah, and it's a guy as well in Felipe Lima who, as you mentioned, is a prospect, but he's also a prospect that came into the UFC with 13 fights, the last of which was a 5-round octagon fight against Jonas Magard, who, is a real good fighter on the scene. He's fought in Brave and other places as well. That's a real career he had put together before. That Naimov, we've talked a bit about Naimov in the past, and I like Naimov a lot. And the fact that he went in there and he choked, not only beat him, he choked him out and then beat Miles Johns, who, is probably the sort of the Ronnie Barcelos type of test. Maybe not as tough of a test, but he got over that and he got over it in good fashion. Look, I still believe in Peyton Talbot. I know he got absolutely destroyed in his last fight, but he did go to a decision. And I think there is something in that as well. He got beaten, but he didn't necessarily give up at any stage during that. He was beaten and the fight was beaten out of him, but the fact he got the decision I think is good. I do think he will rebound. Will he rebound this quickly? I think it's going to be tough. This is the sort of fight, you could pick one lad, you could pick the other until they actually go in there and we see the way they perform. This is going to be really, because you never know what guys this young in their career, especially a guy like Talbot.
Down to adjustments, isn't it?
It is, of course. He was so good, and then he was so bad. It's unbelievable.
Even if Talbot goes out and loses this one too, it's not the end of the world either.
Correct.
I think he's been somewhat unfairly match made after the first defeat to be put in against a guy like this, to be honest. And sometimes you have to ask questions of what the matchmakers are thinking here, and it's pretty straightforward to me. There, I feel what the matchmakers think is that Peyton Talbot has built up this name for himself, and they want to use his name for a guy like Felipe Lima, and they're putting him on the opening fight of the International Fight Week card, and they're hoping that Felipe Lima can go out and put on a show there and get the win over a guy like Peyton Talbot and pick up all of the hard work.
Which is absolutely crazy.
Which it doesn't make any sense. You could have both of these guys on the undercard taking on other prospects, and then you could have this fight a little bit further along the career. I think we've gotten past the art of building fighters in the UFC, where we see these prospects being thrown either to the wolves or thrown against each other. It baffles me sometimes, and it somewhat frustrates me too, because I think there's avenues that we can go down to build these fighters a little bit better. And then we can have these fights maybe when one is ranked 8th and one is ranked 9th, where there's actually title and jeopardy kind of implementations on the fight as well. So it's a fucking strange one, but it's something that we've come to have to get used to in the UFC, I think too,
As a smart man once said, Ian, have the best fight the best when they are the best. And
that was that me?
I don't know. Who was I trying to think? Do you know? Funny though. Like, if this fight happened in PFL, it'd actually be perfect, right? And people give out about PFL. No, there's nothing else in MMA. I saw the post going around the other day. What do you miss in MMA? And someone like, the tournaments in Bellator. I'm like, the tournaments going on the PFL now, and they're better. Like, and like a fight. I don't know. The fights in PFL actually matter. Like, there's a lot of fights here. I'm like, oh yeah, they're kind of good fights, but like, do they matter? Whereas all the ones in PFL do. But anyway, yeah, this is for the UFC, for the way the UFC do it. This is just such stupid matchmaking. Like, it really, really is to the points you were making there. But look, hopefully it'll be a good fight though.
Yeah. Speaking of fights that do not matter, the prelim section of this card kind of fits that mantra. I mean, looking at it here, Shawnee, I'm not sure. Maybe we have 3 or 4 ranked opponents that are fighting on the prelims card here. Again, we bring back the point for an international fight week. I remember, geez, it must have been even last year remember we were talking about how good the undercard was on International Fight Week last week. That was almost as good as the highest of high levels of fight night cards. So, not so much to look forward to here. The top of the prelims has Jack Hermanson versus Gregory Rodriguez. You have a really exciting style taking on a really boring style. And, I think, Jack Hermanson probably has that boring style that you will implement and try and get the win over a guy like Robocop. Looking at the rest of the undercard, Shawnee, anything that sticks out to you? Any excited about any fights? Tracy Cortez, obviously, against Viviane Rocha. Another good fight, too.
I think the McKinney-Barshev fight will be pretty good because both of those guys are just kind of maniacs. Like, McKinney will either get knocked out or knock him out early, or else nothing will happen. No one get knocked out. And at the 1.5 round mark of this, we realize this is going to a decision and it'll just turn boring. But that Araujo Cortez fight kind of intrigues me a little bit because, like, I there was once upon a time I jumped on the Viviane Araujo bandwagon and I jumped off it fairly quickly. But the reason I jumped on is like I think she's a very good athlete for the division. She's good, well-rounded fighter. It just didn't click for her. But Tracy Cortez is almost the opposite of that. She has just become someone who's really stuck to it and put a game together that works well for her. But sometimes fighters like that come up short against people with maybe an athletic advantage over them, which I think Araujo does have, but does she have enough to implement it at this stage for her career? I think, look, that's intriguing. This Haider Emil as well at 11-0 is a pretty good prospect. And Delgado at 9-1 is not a bad fighter either. And, Jonathan Denise is probably one of the best up-and-coming heavyweights in the world at the moment, which is kind of crazy because I don't think he's actually that.
Yeah, that doesn't really say a whole lot, Johnny. Let's be real.
And that's Jacoby Smith at 10-0 against Nico Price. He's probably going to bludgeon Nico Price. So that should be probably a good way to up the third. He's not a bad card all in all, but I would like a bit more like Razum has maybe.
Yeah, I think a little bit more jeopardy on the undercard. I think is what we would like, in the famous words of Graham McDonald. I think it's an exciting undercard. I think it's an undercard that will deliver. I think Terence McKinney is absolutely going to knock Vladimir Borshev into the next dimension because Borshev, Shawnee, is so open, man. He's powerful, but he's so open. When he throws shots, it's like all I can see is just like this devastating knockout for Borshev in that fight. Just every time I've seen that fight, I get the flash of red light and I'm like, oh, it's going to be like one of those ones where we're going to be like, oh Jesus, that's a vicious knockout. But remember those words. That has been our preview for UFC 317. Ilia Topuria versus Charles Oliveira. Alejandro Pantoja versus Kai Kara France. Enjoy the fights, everybody, on Saturday night. Shawnee and the boss man will be there to break all the fights down on Sunday for your pleasure. Until then, take care, enjoy yourselves, and we'll talk to you again soon.